This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Shruti Pandey. She didn't tell me how to say her last name, but I just winged it there. Shruti, hello. How are you?
I am doing absolutely fantastically great, and I'm over the moon that we're doing this.
You are such a kind soul. So, you have a podcast called ItiShruti. Your kind of slogan is that knowledge should be accessible by all, which I love that. You're also a freelancer. You do quality assurance, which, hello, everyone. I do quality assurance as well. I've been doing it for a long time. So this is exciting for me. I don't get to have people in my space. I don't get to have people who are currently freelancers and kind of in the transition phase to starting their own business and have a podcast. So this is going to be fun. So Shruti, tell me, where did you come from? Where did you grow up in India?
So I am basically born and raised in Mumbai, if you would have heard on your side of the world. I'm pretty sure most people know it as the economic capital of India. So I'm basically from Mumbai. That's my base station, and I love it to the core. Being here for so many years, I've also gotten a little bored, but I think nothing beats this state in India. So I'm just very lucky and proud and happy for the fact that my parents, my grandfather, he chose to settle in this state of our country.
What do you love about it?
It's basically like if I were to compare it with the USA, Mumbai is like a New York, so everybody is welcome. So it's like multilingual, multicultural, and wherever you're from, you're just a part of the city. You just become this part of the city and the dream of whatever you want to be, right? From a movie star to a engineer to a doctor to a whatever. So I mean, before coming to this podcast, I was wondering, am I really like a first generation solopreneur or freelancer, entrepreneur, whatever in my family? And it's so wrong because like my great grandfathers, they first came from another state in India to Mumbai to try something. Then my grandfather settled, became a doctor, studied here, had his family. So I think I would be wrong if I would say that I'm like the first generation entrepreneur of my family because it's so wrong and so many levels.
It's a common thread that it runs in the family. You know,
Mhm.
I hear from a lot of people that it's in their genes. If it's
And
not
thanks
direct,
to your
doing it.
thanks to your podcast, actually, you made me think all of that. I mean, usually it's so easy for us to, get into generation trauma, childhood trauma, and stuff like that when we think about families and this and that. And you're like, where is this coming from? But I think with so much negativity being marketed in the world, we just forget that so much of good things come in our genes from our ancestors and from our parents and grandfathers and all of that. I think the ability to talk too much for me to host a podcast and right now talking with you and your viewers, I think that is also something which is, yeah, passed on to me in my gene.
It has to be. I think we all like to think we're these individual snowflakes that kind of fall from the sky, but like we are
No.
our ancestors, right? That's who we are. So, well, talk to me a little bit about your schooling. I mean, you love where you're from. Where did you go to college? And then kind of talk to me a little about the transition into the real 9 to 5 world, because it'll eventually get us to the freelance world. But talk to me about college and how you dealt with that.
Wow, this nobody asks such questions. So thank you so much for asking this because I actually feel that you don't become in general. I'm not talking about myself, but in general, I don't think anybody just becomes a founder. Like they get up one day out of their bed and they're like, oh my God, I want to have a business. I think it all comes from like we have a phrase in Hindi, but I think most of the people wouldn't understand. It basically says ki, something like your habits, your traits, your character, people can notice it right when you're in a cradle. Literally from that moment, people can understand what you will be. So my schooling was very crazy. Like my dad comes from an English medium, my mother also comes from an English medium, but she was a convent educated. So I think there has always been a battle in my family and my genes also. So there's a lot of fight which goes on within my genes. And I'm like, what should I be choosing really? So my father was like, I'll settle with the English medium school, but not a convent because I'm sorry, I don't want to hurt anybody's sentiments. But he basically was like, I don't want anybody imposing their religion on my kids. Though in my family, we are very liberal. I mean, I come from a very orthodox Brahmin family, as they say, a Hindu family, you may call it, but like Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, even Muslims, everything is like very unity and diversity kind of a thing in my family. We're all very respectful to all religions and gods, but somehow my father was like, no, just English medium, it should be. So I went to a semi government aided kind of a setup here in Mumbai. And if I could go back in time, I would still choose that school. I don't know why, but I would still choose that school because no matter what the hardships and everything, it was run by a trust of South Indian people that we have in India. So people coming from the south of India. And Sanskrit was a language for me. There was Marathi, which was a language for me because I'm from Maharashtra state. So I think when growing up, I was learning like 4 or 5 languages just because of my schooling and the place I lived in Mumbai. So I think I'm very lucky in that aspect because I feel your brain develops even better if you're learning more languages. It's better to learn more languages that you can speak rather than just typing languages. Yeah, Java, Python,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we can flatter each other with all of that, but it's so important if we learn languages which we can communicate with. So that was the thing. And college was even crazier because I come from an Orthodox family, like I mentioned. So girls getting educated was like mm, the heaven and hell would all break loose. So you're not supposed to be educating a girl child. Why waste that money? And I'm the eldest one in my family on my father's side. So I think I had to be a rebel for a good cause and, be that leader by example so that cousins, especially the girls, could have somebody they could relate to because I had none when I was growing up. So, like, there would be a lot of taunt that I would get to hear, and even my mother. So, I grew up in a joint family. So, we literally lived in a big family in a decent small house in Mumbai. So, there were a lot of people, less space. So, I think all of that taught me how to, communicate with people, adjust with people, understand their temperament. Because now when I look back, I realize all of that happened with me in my life, right from my childhood, it actually worked out in my favor some way or the other. Right? Really. Because if I'm living with 10 people under the same roof, it's like, what do you call it? Big brother, big boss, whatever you have. It's like
Yeah.
it's, it's like a daily thing in my house. I don't need to switch on a TV to see that, right?
It's reality TV. You lived reality TV. Did you go straight from college into doing quality assurance, or was there some sort of like bridge to that?
I actually wanted to be a doctor, but I come from a doctor's family, like grandfather doctor, father doctor. So they didn't want me to be, getting into the stress of that occupation. So my father was like, you should be getting into engineering. And right after my engineering, the first job that I got at Infosys, I have a very bad habit of being the best wherever I go as a student, as an employee. So I topped their training. And if you top their training, they'll put you on something which gets them money, which is testing. So there I was. I didn't choose testing. Testing chose me.
No, look, let me tell you something. Nobody chooses testing. Testing chooses people. That's a
Exactly.
great. I think that should be like put that on my next T-shirt. Testing, chooses you, because people
Can
ask
you
all the
say
time.
by Shruti Pandey something like the quote is
Yes,
by
100%. I'll
something
give
like
you
that?
the 100% credit for that. We can split the royalties on the T-shirts. I think, yeah. Well, it's just funny because a lot of people ask, like,
Yeah.
I can't answer them. They say, "Well, how do I get started in QA?" I'm like, I have no idea. I mean, there's not really any QA schools. I mean, I'm sure there is online. I'm sure there's stuff out, but like, you usually kind of stumble into it. So it's interesting that you did as well. So you bounced around a bunch of places after that. I saw you went to Browser Stack, you did a bunch of cool different QA things. What led you to doing freelancing? How did you get to doing freelancing?
I'll try to keep this short. I'll really try my best to keep this short. I worked at 2 MNCs. I worked at 2 banks. I worked at 2 startups. And I realized I think I've seen it all. I've been it all because again, like I said, I have always been very hard on myself and I want to be the best. So whatever work was given to me, even as a tester, I would go like over and above my task and act as a PM, act as a business owner, scrum master, agile, this, that, blah, 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 whatever you name it, right? So I did all of that while I was moving from one place to another. And I was getting these opportunities. By God's grace, I was actually getting these opportunities. And actually got many more, which I had to say no to because it would look very bad on your resume if you keep hopping from one place to another, which is like, seriously, when HRs reach out to me, I feel like you are the ones who should be guilty of coming to me and, making me have to switch and then blame me for switching so much because I didn't ask for it. It just happened. So after two MNCs, two banks, and two startups, I was like, I think I've seen enough of how work is done, what kind of work is done, what kind of office politics goes on. I just got tired of the good and bad everything. And I'm getting old, right? I'm not getting any younger. So I was like, if I don't try this now, then when? So I took the plunge, like January 2022, while I was getting all the tempting offers for another great hike and great designation and great companies. Thank you so much. And I was like, no. And they're like, oh, so where are you going to? And it's like, I'll let you know. I ultimately choose this because, yeah, I think I also wanted my freedom. 10 years of corporate, I wanted to have some life back because I think, are we kidding? There is no such thing as work-life balance. You have to manage all of that crazily. Like, and again, I think in India, especially as a female, like I had to give so many sacrifices, including like not having a personal life, not getting married, not having kids, etc., etc. But still, you live with a family, right? You're supposed to take care of them. The parents are getting old and all of such things. So yeah, I worked on my career as a baby.
Where do you think your drive to be the best came from?
From my mother. Absolutely. Hands down from my mother. Oh my God. I still see her. I mean, I don't want to get into making this a sympathy thing or something, but even now while we are talking, she's gone to doctor with my dad because I was like, I can't accompany you today. And she's undergoing a cancer recurrence treatment.
I'm sorry to hear.
I haven't seen a person as strong as my mother. And I think I've become 20x times stronger than her, which is actually a problem rather than a good thing if you become that strong in a world like ours. So yeah, it's definitely comes from my mother.
So, how did you get started in freelancing? What was your, let's call it your first customer? I mean, again, I love this conversation much because
Right.
this is the one that people should listen to. I've been working in the corporate world, I'm burnout, but I've got enough experience that I think I could do this on my own. Like you are the shining example of that. So tell me how, you had all these offers, you did all this stuff, you said, no, thank you, I'm going to do my own thing. How did you do your own thing? How did you start to freelance?
So it's weird when I was working. So there was one gentleman from the US. I don't want to name him because he's a very, very
Yeah,
good.
you don't have to name any names. I always say that.
So
Don't name any
this
names.
guy,
Just, you can generally speak.
he just tried to, lure me into something. He's like, why can't you just moonlight? And I'm a person of character and ethics and values. Like, that's how I've been raised in my Orthodox family. And I was like, I can do this. And I didn't choose that. And I was like, no, this doesn't work for me. If I'm supposed to help you or your brother or whatever, in whatever work that you want me to help you with, I would rather leave my job, take it up as a full time or something. And he's like, you're such a fool. Like, why can't you do this? And I think that was one of the trigger point that happened while I was working. And I wasn't even sure that seed was actually germinating and cultivating in my head somewhere. It so happened that by 2022, the last manager that I had in my organization, he is an amazing, amazing Russian fellow. And I was working at this startup, and he was like, I don't understand. Why don't you get into consulting? You would be so amazing. I was like, yeah, I know if I can do it for them, I can do it for myself. I know, but that's too scary, right? And then there was another gentleman who I interacted with through one of the testing conferences. And he was like, why don't you get into consulting? So I think it was some destiny's plan. Like all of them were men, ironically. Like all of them were propelling me and instigating me. Why don't you get into this? And when I finally decided it, it was really scary because how do you land that first customer, that first job, that first project, or whatever you may call? So, and I don't get onto, those sites which offer you freelancing projects. I don't know why. I'm sorry to all of you, but I find it really lame. I'm like, I've been working in this industry for a while. I have some network. If I can get people from there who trust me enough. And that's exactly how I started my podcast also. So I was like, if there are people who think that I can do good for them, that's how I'll go. And ironically, my first project was from that gentleman, his brother actually. You won't believe it wasn't a testing project, but it was a US based construction company who wanted me to help them for their growth strategies and help them as a technical project manager or a program manager. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved it to the core. I loved it to the core. I mean, I did that things for the startups also, right? Like when you're in a startup, you just can't be a tester and a technical person. You have to be out there, be salesy, be markety, etc., etc. And I had those numbers. I was like very confident. But when this came, I was like, oh, really? Then he was like, why don't you just do a website revamp for us and have the marketing in place? What is really happening and what have I been getting into? So yeah, that was my first project and first customer, and I absolutely enjoyed it. And later they were really testing blogs, testing projects. Can you help us test Web3? I was like, hell yeah, why not? Web3, yes. They're like, nobody has tested it before. I was like, that's what I always want, but nobody has tested before. So this is why I can get it.
I told you, I knew you had a good story for that. But I think you're right. Testing is kind of the last line of defense. It's kind
Mhm.
of the bucket where all of software development's problems kind of show themselves.
Yeah.
And you have to identify, is that a technical problem? Is it a product problem? Is it a project problem? Is it a person problem? Is it all these different things? So over the years, it's great to hear that you finally got to use all that experience to deploy it somewhere else. Right? So
Only a tester could have figured that out. Are you having something in that specs? Like, is it magical that you can read me
right.
like a book? Because I mean, I actually wrote about this on LinkedIn a couple of years back that if you do one job right, for instance, testing, if you do that one thing right, you can be so many things. Like, I remember getting job offers to be a business analyst because we actually do something like that, right? We do requirement gathering, we understand, we prioritize stuff, we automate, we code, we test manually, we do all sorts of things. And I think if you just master one thing, in my case, it was testing, you can be anything that you want: project manager, program manager, product management. Like there's so much, and everything from a vaccine to a Tesla needs testing, right? Everybody
I like
needs
that. From a vaccine to a Tesla. I think that's another T-shirt. We're gonna walk away here with
need
a
my
full
name
a
on
full
those.
T-shirt. Yeah, we're gonna make a T-shirt after this. So tell me about the podcast. Why did you start the podcast?
I wanted to do
And what
that.
is the podcast? Tell me a little bit about it first, and then why did you start it?
I wanted to do that for so long. I mean, you would have figured out I'm a talkative person, right? I like talking is like breathing to me. It comes naturally. I don't have to do scripting or like this is real time. I'm a Java person, right? I code in Java, so I do better at runtime. That's how I
Right.
see it. So yeah.
Uh,
So I wanted to start a podcast. I had no idea that I'm supposed to call it a podcast. I just wanted to get people from my network and talk to them because I know a bunch of people. So I had this thought since pre pandemic. But again, if you're an employee, there are clauses, there are constraints. You're not a free bird, right? So
mm-hmm.
do things really that easily. And I was like, when would I be able to do something like this? And I think the pandemic triggered something. It made me realize that life is short. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. And if I go, I think I need to do something which really helps society at large. So, as I had no idea what I'll be doing, but I was like, I want to talk to people, record it, and put it on YouTube for free. So that in my country, especially, I see kids these days have an excuse that the courses are so expensive and we don't get access to this, blah, blah, blah. I mean, excuses are so many, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to create something where I had that motto in my head that knowledge should be accessible to all. So I got all these amazing folks in my network, right from experts in their area to founders, CTOs, CXOs, and I would talk to them like we do. And it feels like people is turned today for me. So
This is it. This is your big moment. This turn around. Who was your first podcast guest?
he is Chinmay Mishra, and he's the founder of a platform called Who Live. So they basically rent space to live for kids. So something like a hostel arrangement, and kids don't have that much budget, right? When they go out in the world to get the education, and sometimes we don't get hostels in the college, so they have to stay somewhere outside.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm marketing this, but Chinmay sir, I did this for you. So
Yeah.
he
He
was
can
my
he gets
first
some free plug on the show.
he was my first guest, and I had actually approached a lot of my people, my network, and somebody else was in my head for the first guest, but he was like, Shruti, let's just do this. So when I completed like 100 videos on my podcast, I was like, just come back again because you showed that faith in me to be the first one. This is
Oh,
the
look at
second.
that. Love that. If you had to start freelancing over again tomorrow, if you the lessons learned, think about somebody who was in your shoes beforehand. What would be step one to go start freelancing tomorrow?
My God, I'll tell you something, especially if you're freshers and kids and in college, you already are doing a lot of job as a freelancer or entrepreneur or business owner because in my college days, we used to get that crazy phone to make calls to arrange for sponsorship for events. Like I was a part of such committees and IEEE councils, etc. And I had no idea that I was doing a cold call. I had no idea that I was getting business. I was getting money.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting money. And ironically, I did my engineering from a all women's university. And the sponsorship that I got that year for my college was from a all men's fashion apparel store. And I think it speaks volume about me that, oh my God, I'm a crazy, crazy person and I can get this, I can get anything happen. So I think never underestimate yourself. I understand we come from families where we see money problems, where we see, oh my God, how am I going to complete my education? But all of us in good or bad ways or ugly ways, I'm sorry about that, have that instinct of becoming that owner and businessy and stuff like that. And I tell people that every time we go for an interview, it's actually sales because, a lot of time coming from a technology background, engineering background, we think that, oh my God, sales is a bad thing. Why am I supposed to do that? But every time you're like, when somebody asks you, tell me something about yourself, that's the biggest sales question ever on this planet, right? You're selling yourself in an interview. So never be afraid of the fact that, okay, I'm supposed to do a sales thing or something because until unless your product sells, it's not going to work. You're not going to get the salary. And also my middle class mentality, that's what it's called here in India, middle class, like literally you're middle class. You're sandwiched between the lower classes and the rich people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I used to have those things. Like my first project in the third year of my engineering was a e-tiffin services, which is something like a Zomato or Swiggy or Uber Eats. And I created
Mm-hmm.
that way back in 2009. And my professors were like, why don't you just make it live? And my middle class mentality stopped me from doing that. I mean, some days I feel so mad at myself. I would have been a multi-millionaire kind of a person today and would be bragging so much more on this podcast, right? With you.
Your value is very high regardless, so it
So
doesn't matter.
that kind of kills me. And like I was saying, we all have those instincts from very early on. Don't wait for that for you to hit a 30 or a 40 to start your business. That's what I could tell myself. Like I could have done it so early. Like, why did I not?
It's a confidence thing, right? It has to be.
I
I had the
guess
same
more than
conversation.
confidence,
What
it's
is
about
it?
money. It's about the
Is it
money.
money though? Is it really money or is it fear and
Yeah.
confidence? I think
No.
it's fear and confidence.
Do you
That's
think
my
this
take.
person can lack confidence? No.
I think you were afraid to step out of your comfort zone at that time. This version of you, that person was crazy. Of course they should have made that thing. But I talked to so many people. And I
Mm.
feel like it's the same story. It's the fact that, you do have to live through something. Like, you do have to kinda get the experience and you gotta have those moments where you go, "Man, I should have done it then." So then later on, you can make the leap to do it. But, I mean,
Yeah.
this podcast isn't about me, it's about you, but my take on it is just that confidence and fear are the 2 things that hold people back, and if they could just do it. I say it every week, I say it to everybody, every podcast I'm on, I say, "Just do
Mm.
it. Just go do it. If you have an idea, try it," right? And maybe
Yeah.
that worked back then, maybe it didn't, maybe your app would have been a success. Maybe it wouldn't have been, but you wouldn't have known unless you tried. So, give me 3 things health wise, mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever they are, that you're doing on a daily basis or weekly basis or whatever, to keep yourself healthy.
I don't feel guilty in saying no.
I like
Just
that.
stop feeling guilty of
Love
saying.
that.
I mean, like, I think I'm getting so much better in setting boundaries, like personally, professionally. I'm like, it's better to, yeah, I always prefer to be honest, but that hesitation of, oh my God. And again, it's a culture thing, like you're a girl, you're not supposed to say no. You're supposed to be probably a pleaser. And that never appealed to me. Never. So no used to be my favorite word, but I used to be, oh, I'm sorry, but I cannot do this. And I've gotten rid of the sorry. I'm like, I cannot do this.
You're like, "No, thank you." Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's
What
smart.
else?
I Thanks to freelancing, yes, it's scary. Yes, sometimes I'm afraid, oh my God, what would be the next project, how I'll be earning, and things like that, where my next money is coming from. That stability of a constant paycheck is gone. And in my case, I had gotten it to a point where it was really hefty and comfy and nice. And
Mhm.
it was a really mad moment to take the plunge to freelancing after that. But I now have my life, I never had that. Like ever since a kid, I was like this overachiever kind of a person. So having that first rank in school, college, like I said, topper at the training and the first company. Now I have my life for me, and that's such a breather. I can't tell you how amazing that is. I mean, I'm happy if I don't get a project for a month, but if I have my life, I'm like, so.
But you look very calm and happy with the fact that you have your life. What's number 3?
Well, number three isn't really something I'm a pro at yet, but I wish I would get, that yoga, exercising, or something of the sort into my
Okay.
life. I think thanks to working from anywhere, I usually choose my home. That's my space. That's my safe space. And yeah, haven, if I were to say. I work from home. I think that really kills the essence of your movement and everything. While I enjoy this very much, I still meet people. I still do a lot of meetings, and sometimes I have to travel to clients to get that project. And it makes sense. But yeah, I think if I could get into some of the physical fitness mode, I would be really happy with myself. That's something
Alright.
I'm still working on.
Well, it's fair. You're busy. The physical thing is definitely a mental thing too. Like, when you start getting that in, the biggest thing I've realized is, like, the days that I mean, I do it every day. I work out every day, and if I don't, I think about it all day, and I'm, like, frustrated by it all day, and then by the end of the day, I'm like, "I wish I would have just bitten the bullet and worked out in the morning." So when I do it in the morning, like I did today, that is gone, and that's not in my head, and it's not something I think about. It's like you do the hardest stuff, and it's the same thing with anything else. I tell you do the hardest stuff, early in the day. Like, I just get that out of the way, and I don't have to worry about it. So I definitely, I think you're dead on. I think you just, out of the million other things you have going on, maybe make that a priority. But, well, since you've watched this, you probably know the mystery question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
Non-business related. If you could do anything on earth and you didn't have to worry about failing, if you couldn't fail, what would you do?
If I didn't have to work to
If you
worry.
if you could do anything on earth, but you
Mhm.
couldn't fail, what would you do?
Oh, that's a caveat. I can't fail.
You keep whatever it is, something, a bucket list item or something you've always wanted to do that you're afraid that you fail. What is something that you would do if you couldn't fail?
I think that's something I'm already working on, and it's something that I've had like a Mother Teresa thing in me. I hate it, but I do like saving the world. I don't know why. Like that is one great defect and bug in me. Like even the podcast is for that, right? Like giving back to the society, giving back to the kids. Like having something for the next generations where they can look up to something and just hear those conversations for free. So yeah, you can't fail in that, right? I mean, very few people will go to Mars. I hope people have watched the movie 2012. We all are supposed to be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Creating
I love
a
that.
system or lives, saving lives or something of the sort, which
Okay.
would make people. And I think a couple of things that I'm already doing is like a leadership and example kind of a thing. Though I don't want to boast about it, but if my freelancing thing works, it's an example for them. If it fails, it's a lesson for them as well as well as for me. Okay, how many things not to do. But again, even Edison failed 1,000 times to create that bulb, right? So I can try a few times.
Well, I can tell you, I have 2 little girls. I hope both of them have a role model as good as you someday because you're very impressive. The fact that you thought you shouldn't be on this show and were worried about being on this show is ridiculous. You are fantastic. You are doing so many great things. You're working hard. You've making your own path. You're presenting material for other people to help them. So I'm honored to have you on the show. I do appreciate it very much. If people are trying to find you or the podcast, what is the best way to do that?
I am not on Insta. I am not on Twitter. I am unlike any flashy markety salesy people. And I think they have to do what they have to do for their living. But I choose to be a real person. Like that's my ethos, that's my core. And I can't compromise on that as an employee or as a freelancer or podcaster. So I try my best to be on LinkedIn and my podcast is on YouTube. So I would love for people if they want to connect with me and if I was able to help you or guide you in some way because of Jay's podcast. I mean, I think I feel honored really that it came from you. And I feel actually sad that people in my country don't understand what an uncut jewel they have here. So sorry, India.
No, well, we'll put the links and everything in the episode notes, but I hope people reach out to you. I hope people check out your podcast. I think we should do a podcast. I want to do another one, and I was thinking about doing one on quality assurance or something. So I was like, we should do it. We
Let's
should do our own podcast. You are phenomenal. I love your energy. You are a breath of fresh air. I can see why you've taken off, and I see why things are going well for you. So keep up the good work. And I'll talk to you again soon, all right?
let's keep in touch. Yeah.
Have a good rest of your afternoon. I'll talk to you. See you, Shruti. See ya.